Hello and welcome to Statescoop TV. I'm Jake Williams. I'm here with Michael Cockrill. He's the CIO for the state of Washington. Michael, how you doing?
I'm good, Jake. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So we are here at the NASCIO Midyear Conference 2017. We're talking all things priorities, all things technologies. What are your main priorities and focuses for the year ahead, and how have they changed over the last year?
You know, they're pretty consistent from last year to this year. And I end up with two main focuses. One of them is around the areas where IT and public policy overlap. So those are digital privacy, cybersecurity, the Internet of Things, places where policymakers who have, all policymakers have people who advise them, but the advisors in the technology space really primarily do advice around economic development. They don't do advice around how technology is actually going to influence and change people's lives. And in these areas, my office ends up being the primary, really, advisor to both the legislature and to the governor's office. So we try and put a lot of focus on that. Washington has done work to take that set of priorities and codify them. So we now have in law an Office of Cybersecurity and an Office of I'm trying to remember what it's written in law, but it's basically the Privacy Office, Privacy and Digital something or other. But actually codifying that in law was a big step forward because it said, look, if my priorities change or are different from the next guy's, the state believes that these are things that matter. So we that has been, particularly cybersecurity, has been my number one focus since I took this job over 4 years ago. But the broader issue of how digital technologies are changing the way people's lives and what that means to policymakers is really where we're putting more focus.
Sure.
And then the other part, which, not surprising for my role, these aren't technology issues, right? I don't end up focusing on technology issues, right? I end up focused on culture issues and policy, et cetera. So the other big one is how do we attract and retain talent? And, we've done this interview 4+ years. I'm sure I've told you the same thing all 4 years. That's, for a whole variety of reasons, that's the biggest business problem facing the state of Washington.
And so, when we talk about whether it's workforce issues or cybersecurity or any of the other things that we talk about regularly, how are you planning and visioning for that? Tell me about that enterprise visioning process and kind of describe how you're planning and executing these big projects.
So, unfortunately, those two things end up to be a little bit discontinuous, right? Because you vision for them one way, and then you have to go out and convince people that your vision is right. Particularly, the larger the project, the more more true that is, right? If I'm looking at relatively small experimental things that can live within my budget, I do it one way. But if you're talking about a big project, the state's very agile. We just operate in 2-year sprints. So it has to.
It's a good line.
You have to. You have to get buy-in. You have to get budget. You got to do it on a calendar. So how do you vision it is a different thing than how you execute it, because they're disconnected by the procurement process and the funding process. But the way we vision it is to come to things like this, to talk to what other states are doing, to look at the things that are happening in the core market. Then the technology for a state, like understanding technology strategy, frankly, it's fairly simple.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything lives on a bell curve. And we are behind the leading edge of that curve. We're supposed to be behind. You don't want your government spending the people's money on experimental things at scale, right? You want us to be doing things that are tried and true that we know work. So if you were to graph things out, startups are way over here on the right-hand side, and many of them fail, but we always learn a lot from the failure. Government's over here. So if I want to know what's next, all I got to do is look ahead at what the private sector is doing and where they've been. So visioning in that context is look at what those technology curves look like, and then apply that to the 140 different businesses that the state of Washington runs within the executive branch, and ask yourself, what does the IoT, what does that mean to us? Where are we going to interact with machine learning? How can I apply, the one I spend a lot of time thinking about right now is augmented reality. A lot of augmented reality research going on at the U, a lot of economic development happening in the state of Washington. Where can we in the government apply augmented reality to make it faster so that labor and industry can do inspections faster, and we can get your elevator, requirements done in real time rather than a 4-day process. So that's how we do the visioning, and then you decide, okay, here are my priorities, but it's a zero-sum game when you hit the budget.
Right.
So that we could talk forever about what happens after that.
Sure. That definitely changes how things actually get done for sure. So at conferences like these, we spend a lot of time talking about buzzwords, whether it's the latest and greatest technology or just a word that people seem to think correlates with what they're doing. What's the biggest buzzword that you find yourself getting tired of, but how are you channeling the ideas that it represents into some action?
The cloud is the biggest buzzword I'm tired of hearing. It's not a word that means anything, or it means absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Right. So, that said, the cloud, as the question clearly lays out, it's not a thing. It's a different way of licensing. It's a different way of operating. It's a different way of funding. It's a different way of delivering services to your customer. So, we have a cloud first, and Washington has a cloud first strategy. We don't have a cloud first policy because policy is a real thing, and agencies would have to, we'd be spending a lot of money for decisions where it's not, where, the cloud isn't a panacea to all the world's woes. There's good reasons why legacy systems are the way they are, and you can't just simply pick them up and move them out.
Sure.
That example is where we spend a bunch of time. How do you educate the decision makers in the business to understand what the cloud is, how to segment it, how to think about it, how to analyze what compute loads belong in the cloud versus what belongs in your data center versus what belongs on your desk. So the cloud as a buzzword is old and tired, and we need a better one. The cloud as a concept is right there in the bell curve, right? It's past the bleeding edge. It's the way the whole rest of the world is running their business.
Yeah.
And it's now time for government to adopt that. I would argue it's only now is it time for government to adopt it. Only now do people really start to get that it isn't a universal panacea, and that you don't go to the cloud because you think you're going to save money. Right? That used to be 4 years ago, people believed that. If the government started adopting it based on that rationale, we'd be in a world of hurt right now.
So, a lot of what we've talked about, whether it's cloud or whether it's cybersecurity or privacy or any of those things, a lot of those things require working with others.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you're working to collaborate outside the boundaries of your agency, and what have some of the challenges been that have come along with that?
My agency has first of all we do is work with others, right? We're a support organization, but we have two different parts. One of them is the Office of the Chief Information Officer, and we're the police, right? And the other one is the operations of core IT, and we're the electric company, right? We keep the lights on, we're part of everybody's IT team, but our entire business is working with our customers. So it isn't, that's not a secondary thing. It's not like, oh wow, we got to start working with people outside your agency. All we do is work with people outside our agency in these two very, very different ways that are kind of combined.
Yeah.
So it's a hard question to answer.
Sure.
Because I'd just be describing how we do business. Right?
That's totally fair. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing how that stuff grows and develops over time. Michael, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For more about what Michael Cockrill's working on in the state of Washington, check out statescoop.com. Again, I'm here with Michael Cockrell. He's the CIO for the state of Washington. I'm Jake Williams, StateScoop's Manager of Strategic Initiatives. Thanks for watching.